In this video, I'm going to show you how to shoot a galaxy in the city. Now, I live in a Bortle Class 8, which is quite bright, and so shooting galaxies or reflection nebula is a real challenge. Now, I chose the Andromeda Galaxy for a couple of reasons. For one thing, you can see the frame here of my camera is that it completely fills the frame, and that's a very good thing to do. The second thing, you look over here at the magnitude. Now, the magnitude, a low magnitude, means that it's bright. So a 3.4 magnitude is quite bright, and that's another good thing. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to have a high signal-to-noise ratio. And so if you have a big, bright object, then you're going to have a better chance of getting a high signal-to-noise ratio for your camera. So here you can see Andromeda. And right at the time it gets dark, it's pretty much at the zenith. It would be better if I were earlier in the year and then could see it from both sides of the zenith, but this gives me at least 3 hours of imaging time till about 9 p.m. to about right there. And then at that time it hits the trees in my backyard. Now, if you're photographing in the city or even at a dark site, the moon is your enemy if you're doing broadband like a galaxy. So the first day is going to be January the 5th, and as you can see, we are approaching a new moon situation. I'm hoping to photograph all the way through Tuesday, but right now, with the time of the day that Andromeda is visible in my backyard, I don't have any moon above the horizon, so that's very, very good news, and that gives us an even better chance of getting a strong signal-to-noise ratio. Now, there's an excellent video and information about the signal-to-noise ratio by Dr. Robin Glover, and he developed SharpCap. And so here's a tool here that shows you how to calculate the number of electrons per pixel per second from the sky glow. And so right down here I put in what I have for my camera. I'm using a mono. It has a 4.63 micron. That's a bin 2. I have an f5.7 scope. And as we decrease the sky glow here, like Bortle 6, we're down to 4.6. We go back up to 8, which is about where I'm at, 9.73. So that is double the rate. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to photograph and capture enough information before the sky glow wipes out the image. And so basically the sky glow just becomes the signal because it oversaturates the entire image. And so there's a balancing act, and you have to carefully calculate your exposure time. But the rule of thumb is this: if the brighter the sky, the shorter the exposure time. And so if you go to a really dark site, you know, like 4 is where I can get without too far a drive, and look how low it is, 0.67, just going to a 4. Now if you can go to a great site, you know, a 2 or a 1, well then it drops a lot. So in a really dark site, you can take long exposures without the sky glow wiping out your image. Now, there are various tools and calculators on the web to calculate your signal-to-noise ratio, and here's one that is pretty handy, and it works on the similar principle. So we have down here a desired signal-to-noise ratio, and 100 would be excellent, very, very good. And so what I've done is I've put in the parameters for the red filter in my sky conditions, and then it gives you an idea of how long it would take in order to get an excellent quality image of 100. And you can see here that when we zoom over, as we increase the subs, the signal-to-noise ratio increases. But you can see here that it would really take a bunch. It would take 9,500 at 15 seconds each to reach a signal ratio of 100. And that's 40 hours, and that's a gob. Let's see what happens when we take more exposures. A single sub, signal noise ratio a little over 1. If we want to double it to go to 2, that'll take 4 sub exposures. So that's not bad at all. So, but we want to go from a signal ratio of 2 to 4. We go from 4 to 16. That's 4 squared. to get double. So, and this keeps going on and on and on. So when you want to get to 100, well, then that's a lot. And if you take the square root of 9,558, that's about 97, which is very close to 100. So it's the square of the number of subs to double. So you get early success here, and which is great, and it's not too many subs. But when you want to, you're doubling it again and again and again to get to the much higher signal-to-noise ratio, you have an exponential number of subframes. And that's why it is difficult to do this in a light-polluted sky. 9,558 exposures is a lot of data, and it takes a lot of storage space and it takes a lot of processing time. And I'm not going to be able to do 40 hours for this video, but I will show you the results that I did get. Alright, here's a single subframe from the Andromeda Galaxy in my backyard of Bortle Class 8. And what we're trying to do, if you're going to use a calculator, is you want to measure the signal, not of the brightest part right here, but of one of the arms. And this will be, we take this like this, maybe over here, and then right click and say statistics. Now this is 2678 is the mean, and that is the DSO plus the sky glow. And that's that figure we were just looking at. Now we also want to look at the background. So there's another galaxy right here, and so we're going to come out of the arms and go to a darker spot right here, and this we're trying to look at just the background, and we look at the statistics here, and now the mean is 2614. A little bit different than what I had, but it depends on where you're going to sample, and so I put in what I had sampled previously, and that gives you basically your signal to noise ratio of the two values between the signal that you're trying to measure here versus the sky glow here. Alright, then let's talk about equipment. This is the NSV Boney F5.7. Actually, it's an F7, but with the field flattener, it's 5.7. I'll discuss that in just a second. This is an ED glass, and it's an 80mm aperture. And so here is my new dew heater, because I want to have the best image possible, so I don't want any dew whatsoever. I'm going to use the ASI Air, and we're going to do all of our dithering and everything else with that. Here is the guide scope and the guide camera, and then I'm going to be taking mono data. So here is the ASI 294mm Pro, and then I have an 8-position filter wheel, and we're going to be using RGB data for this first image. You can also do hydrogen alpha and use it as a luminance layer, but for this demonstration I'm going to be doing RGB data. And so the reason that the field flattener is important is this. This scope is an F7, but when you put in a field flattener and reducer, that takes this down. So F7 is what it was. It takes it down to F5.6. What does that mean? Oh, that's about double the amount of light coming in. And that's important, because the last thing that we need is to have a restriction. So it pulls it out, makes it to 440 millimeters in the field of view, and then the image is brighter. And that is another tip that will help you get better images quicker. Nothing wrong with F10 or whatever, it just takes longer. And so a nice fast scope is a good way to help you out. So that's the equipment, and then I'm going to be, with my mount, this is a Skywatcher EQ M35 Pro, and that's how we're going to be taking these images. Now, take a look here at the dither settings. Currently I have it set to 1, and that's because I generally shoot in narrowband or longer exposures. If you dither every 15 seconds, this is going to eat up a ton of time. And so what I think I'm going to do is put in a much higher number. Let me put in something like maybe every 8 or 10. And what dithering does is that it moves the scope just a little bit so you don't have the same hot pixels. But with such a short interval, I don't think the hot pixel is going to be much of a difference. But I am going to do some dithering because I want the best chance possible. Now, you don't have to use a guide camera when you're doing this because 15 seconds is really short, but I really want to do it simply for the dithering. And it does take up a little bit of time, but every 8 frames I think that's acceptable. Alright, I'm just getting set up. As you can see, I got water on the ground because it's been raining all day. I need about 10 more minutes for the clouds to clear. I could see Polaris, so I went ahead and got that polar aligned. But I need Andromeda is straight up. And so I've got a few clouds, so just a few more minutes and we'll get going. Alright, I'm in the ASAR app, and the first thing we want to do is to focus. So we can probably do it right here at Polaris, and we'll run through our focusing. Now, if you're not familiar with the autofocuser, what this does is this will take some exposures, and then it will create a curve that goes down, and it will find the low point of the curve. Once it finds that curve, then it will do it again and find the lowest point. And what that's doing basically is determining the size of the star as we focus it. And so this is the full width half medium size, and so we just need to get that done, and then we can move on to the next step. So there's the first one, and then we'll speed the video up and we'll go through its thing and come back. That's all done, and then now we're going to go to Andromeda. And then the scope will go pretty much straight up. There we go. I get my light out of there. I don't want to mess that up. But we have got a nice clear night, and this should be pretty quick. Hopefully I'm past the zenith. We'll find out here in a second, because we won't be able to image until we're at least 5 minutes past the zenith. Alright, we've succeeded, and now we want to start our guiding. Alright, I'm going to do it bin 2 and create a sequence. Now the difference between bin 1 and bin 2 is that bin 2 is going to take 4 pixels for every unit instead of 1, and it makes the effective pixel size bigger, and that's pretty good for a broadband target like this that completely fills the frame. And so I'm going to do as many as I possibly can, and we're going to get to going. And our guiding has settled down to 0.61 arc seconds, and so we are ready to shoot. Now this will be quick because last night I dithered after every frame, and that took a ton of time. So tonight I'm going to dither after every 8 frames, I believe is what I said. So let's see if it goes right to the next shot. And it does. So there's no hesitation. So I'm going to start getting a lot of frames very quickly, and that's exactly what we want. So we shut off our guiding here. So we're still at 0.8 arc seconds. And then in just 15 seconds, here's our first sub. You can clearly see the arm separation. It's not fantastic, but again, we are shooting in pretty bright skies. Now that everything is set up, we're just going to take a bunch of pictures over the next several nights and get as much data as we possibly can. After several nights of shooting, I got 334 reds, 394 greens, and 349 blues for a total of 1,077 subframes, and that's 26.1 gigabytes of data. So it's time to stack all these images, and I've already done the blue, and I'm going to be working on the red and the green, and I'm using Sirl to stack all these. Alright, now I just finished stacking the greens, and that took 7 minutes and quite a bit of data on my drive. So let's open up that image, and this is over 5,800 seconds, and this is the green. And so the first thing I want to do is do a background extraction. So what I like to do is go along the edge and set some points and try not to land on any stars. And then some samples not in the arms of the galaxy, and then we'll compute that and take a look. Okay, that's pretty good. And so what I could do is probably set a couple more points here in and see if we can get that background a little bit better. And I don't really see any further improvements, so that's probably about as good as we can get. And so what I like to do is I'm not going to stretch the individual subframes. I'm going to save this. No STRs basically just means that I've done a background extraction, but I haven't stretched it. They're asking me if I want to save linearly, and I do. Now we want to do the red, and we'll start that, and then we'll come back when that's done. So here is the red data, and we'll just do the same thing we did before and save that as a linear fit file. Now if we open these and take a look at this, we can see each one of our stacked frames, the red, green, and blue. Now at this particular point they are not registered with each other, so that would be our next step. And so here's how we register them and start our color image. We go back to this tab over here and we start adding these in, and we want to add the red first, then the green. Sometimes if you say all at once, it will order them in a different one, but if I do it this way, it will always be exactly how I want. So red, green, and blue. The order is important, and we'll call the sequence name RGB. And we'll create a sequence. We're just going to do a global star and say go register. Alright, now we want to create our image. There are several ways to do this. I'm going to do RGB composting. So here we have the originals RGB. This is the sequence, and the little R here represents registered. And so the reason I do them in order, because number 1 is the red. So we're going to assign number 1 to the red, number 2 to the green, and number 3 to the blue. So there is our red, our green, and our blue. And blue is always the problem child, and that's due to the light pollution. And then we have, you can see this blue cast, and this is due to the sky glow, but I'll show you how we're going to fix that. So the first thing I want to do is crop this. Now I want to right select here and then say selection, preserve ratio, and then we want to crop out all the stacking artifacts and get a nice composition. Right click and say crop. Now we're in a linear state. I'm using auto stretch, and so we're going to do another background extraction just like we did on the stacked results, and stay away from the galaxy arms. And compute. Alright, now that's taken away a ton of the problem. I'm going to see if I can clean up some of this gradient a little bit more. See, you can see when I did that, we got a little bit better background extraction, and we're going to say apply. Now the next step, I'm going to do a photometric color calibration. All you need to do is press OK, because the metadata is in the fits files and it will look it up automatically. You see it succeeded, and you say close. And you can see now we've got a green cast, and that's very typical. And so I'm going to use the green noise filter, noise reduction. And you can see a dramatic reduction in the amount of green noise. Okay, so we have an auto stretch, so I'm going to go to linear, and this is what it would look like before the stretch. And there are several things you can do, and I like the auto stretch function because it does a nice even job, and then I can do some further modifications later when I'm doing the post-processing. But this gives me an image that I can work with, and you can clearly see we've got some pretty good detail now in the arms, and you can see this galaxy a lot better. And so at this point in the game, I'm going to save it, and this is, I believe, V4, and you can save it in various formats. I'll just choose a TIFF. So there's our TIFF, and we're going to open with Gimp. Alright, so here's our histogram, and that looks pretty good, and you can see here that we need to do some things to make this pretty. So let's see what we can do. First thing I'm going to do is go to color curves and work on the overall value and start working on my black point. I don't want to clip, but I want to get my black point started. And then we'll go back into curves, and then we can go one color at a time. And so what my goal here is to have a high contrast, a high signal to noise. So I'm going to command click, because I'm on a Mac, in the background here, and that's an anchor point. And then I'm going to work on reducing that background and trying to get a stronger image and maintain as much data as I possibly can. And we'll do this one channel at a time. So I saw a blue cast, and I definitely want to reduce that blue cast, and that's due to the light pollution. All right, so we'll accept those results, and then I want to do one final black point adjustment. Try to get a high contrast as I can. And then I want to work on the saturation. It looks pretty nice. And then I'll export it. So here is our final image after about 4 nights of imaging. And I'm pretty pleased with the results, and I hope that you like it. Now when we compare this is the first night, and you're missing a bunch of detail in the galaxy's outer arms. They just aren't there. And then on the next night you can see a bit more, and then in our final image then you can see quite a bit more. And that is the whole purpose of taking many images and stacking them together. So it's totally doable to do this in the city. It just takes a bit more effort, but you can do it if you have the time and the will to do so. So I hope you found that helpful, and if you would like to support me, there are product links in the description below for the equipment that I've used. You could like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.